Legacy dead weight, Reed announced, pointing straight at me in front of 19 colleagues. I was 54. He had been here 6 months. I had been here 26 years and owned 22% of the place. I just said, "Interesting move," and walked out. 4 days later, he dropped his drink at the anniversary dinner when Owen introduced me to the entire board. But let me back up. My name is Wade Ellison. I joined Dune Systems when it was 11 people working out of a converted warehouse in Dallas. Fletcher Dune, the founder, interviewed me himself. He was trying to fix the office server when I walked in for my appointment. I sat down, watched him fight with it for about 90 seconds, then asked if I could take a look. 3 minutes later, it was running. Fletcher looked at me and said, "You're hired. Figure out the rest later." That was 26 years ago. I was 28 years old. Over the next few years, I built the core logistics infrastructure that became the backbone of everything Dune Systems runs on. When the company was burning cash and close to losing its biggest client, I worked 3 straight weekends and rebuilt our fulfillment routing system from scratch. It saved the company. Fletcher knew it. A year later, he offered me a raise. I told him I'd rather have equity. He gave me 22%. The equity was held through a small LLC I set up at the time. My attorney's suggestion: keep it clean, keep it separate. Avoid the kind of internal politics that comes when people know who owns what. My name did not appear directly in the company's shareholder-facing documents. HR processed payroll. The equity sat in a different column that most employees never saw. For 26 years, nobody on the floor knew. Fletcher knew. His son, Owen, knew. The board knew. That was enough. I drove the same truck I had owned for 8 years. I ate lunch at my desk. I wore jeans on Fridays and kept my head down. I was not invisible exactly, just unassuming. Which, as it turned out, was a problem for exactly one person. Reed Calloway arrived 6 months ago. 31 years old, MBA from a school he worked into conversation every chance he got. The board brought him in as innovation manager to modernize our approach. Within 8 weeks, he had rearranged the floor plan so younger employees clustered near his office, launched what he called rapid sprint cycles that cut testing timelines in half, and begun a quiet campaign to push out anyone over 40. I watched it happen. 4 people I had worked alongside for years got maneuvered out one by one. Impossible deadlines appeared on their plates. Key meetings stopped including them. Public critiques landed in front of their teams. Each departure got labeled failure to adapt. HR signed off on every termination. Reed had brought in 2 former colleagues to run that department when he arrived. The board member who recruited Reed, a guy named Harlan Price, who had joined the board 2 years prior, ran interference whenever anyone pushed back. Price had staked his credibility on Reed being the right hire, so questions got deflected. Departures got rationalized. The numbers Reed reported looked good on the surface. My project got taken next. I had been building a supply chain optimization system for 8 months. Reed reassigned it to Paige, a recent graduate who had been with us for 4 months. When I offered to walk her through my documentation, Reed cut me off in the hallway. "We are going in a different direction. Fresh perspective, no legacy assumptions. Paige does not need the old notes." I nodded, took my files home that night. 2 weeks later, my desk was moved to a corner near the storage room. My dashboard access dropped to read only. Comments I left in the shared workspace sat unanswered for days. Then came Monday morning. Reed opened the department meeting by pointing at me and saying, "We need builders, not legacy deadweight." 19 people found their laptops very interesting. Nobody looked up. I said, "Interesting move," picked up my notebook and walked out. That night, I opened a new document and started writing everything down. Every incident, every date, every name, not for a lawsuit, not yet anyway. I had something more specific in mind. Here's what I knew that Reed did not. 7 years ago, I had developed a routing algorithm on my own time, on my own equipment, on a Saturday afternoon when I was trying to solve a problem nobody had asked me to solve. I documented it, filed it in the company's internal repository under my credentials, and moved on. The system ended up being adapted into a minor internal tool that few people used. Nobody had looked at that code in years. Reed had been digging through old repositories looking for anything he could package as a new initiative. He found the algorithm, stripped out the original comments, restructured the file architecture, and had been quietly building his flagship innovation pitch on top of it for 2 months. I knew this because Paige had mentioned, without realizing what she was saying, that the code base Reed handed her had some really old commits buried deep that she couldn't make sense of. I pulled up the original files that night, timestamps intact. Every commit under my username, 7 years of clean documentation. I closed the laptop and let Reed keep preparing his pitch. Reed scheduled his board pitch for a Wednesday afternoon. He had been building up to it for weeks, dropping hints in hallway conversations about a major routing innovation that would cut operational costs significantly. A few of the younger engineers were genuinely excited. They had no idea where the core logic came from. I sat in the back of the room. Reed had not invited me. I found out about the meeting through Paige, who mentioned it in passing while asking if I knew anything about a routing module she had found buried in the old repository. I told her it sounded familiar and left it at that. Reed presented for 40 minutes. Slides, projections, a live demo of the algorithm running against sample data. He called it a ground-up innovation. He used the phrase built from first principles twice. Miles Drayton, our CFO, was leaning forward by slide 12. 2 other board members were nodding along. When Reed finished, there was genuine applause. Miles asked if anyone had questions or additional context to add. I raised my hand. I had my laptop open. I connected it to the projector cable before anyone could object, and I pulled up the original repository. Not the version Reed had refactored. The original, 7 years old, every commit timestamped, every line of core logic under my username. My comments still in the code explaining why I had made each structural decision. I did not accuse Reed of anything. I did not raise my voice. I just walked through the file history the same way I would walk a junior engineer through a debugging session. Calm, methodical, factual. I want to make sure the board has the full picture on where this architecture originated, I said. This is the source repository. These are the original commits. The timestamps go back 7 years. The room got very quiet. Reed started to say something about building on prior work and iterative development. Miles cut him off politely and asked me 3 follow-up questions about the system's core capabilities. I answered all 3. Reed did not speak again for the rest of the meeting. After everyone filed out, Harlan Price stopped next to me in the hallway. He looked like he was deciding whether to say something. He didn't. He just kept walking. That was Wednesday. On Thursday morning, I made some calls. There were 4 people I needed to talk to, engineers and project leads I had worked alongside for years before Reed maneuvered them out. Good people, solid, experienced, the kind you do not replace easily no matter what an MBA tells you about innovation cycles. We met at a diner 2 miles from the office. I got there first and ordered coffee. They arrived within 10 minutes of each other. Nobody looked surprised to hear from me. I think they had all been waiting for something like this. I laid out what I had documented since Reed arrived. The pattern of exclusion, the manufactured deadlines, the meeting removals, the public critiques. I told them about the IP presentation from the day before. I told them what I owned in the company and why that mattered for what came next. One of them had already consulted an employment attorney. Another had kept every email thread where Reed had criticized her work in front of her team. A third had a calendar showing exactly which meetings he had been removed from and when. By the time we finished our coffee, all 4 had signed a letter of intent. Collective action, age discrimination, wrongful termination, not filed yet, just signed, notarized, and ready to move. I had it sent to Faye Hollander in HR that afternoon, with a copy routed directly to Owen Doone's office. The anniversary dinner was the next evening. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened at that dinner. I did not go there to make a scene. I did not go there to humiliate Reed in front of the board. Everything that happened that night was a result of Owen deciding on his own how he wanted to introduce me. I had not asked him to say anything specific. We had talked the week before and he knew the full picture. What he chose to do with that was his call. I wore my Navy suit, my father's watch, the one he wore every day for 32 years until he retired. I do not dress up often. When I do, I mean it. The dinner was at a steakhouse downtown. Dark wood, good bourbon, everyone in suits pretending to be comfortable. I got there early and found a spot at the bar. I was halfway through a club soda when Reed walked in with 2 younger board members. He saw me, gave me that polished nod, the kind that says we are colleagues without meaning anything, and moved on. I nodded back. Owen arrived about 20 minutes later. He came straight to the bar when he spotted me. We talked for a few minutes, real conversation, the kind that comes from knowing someone for a long time. Owen had watched his father build this company from nothing. He knew what I had built inside it. He had read the letter that arrived at his office that afternoon. When dinner moved into the main room and Owen was asked to say a few words, he kept it short. He thanked the team. Talked about what 30 years meant for a company. Then he paused and looked across the room. There is one person here tonight that most of you have probably underestimated, he said. He built the systems this company runs on. He has been here since the beginning, and as of this week, he is the reason we are not walking into a very expensive and very public lawsuit. Another pause. Gentlemen, meet Wade Ellison, 22% owner of Dune Systems, and the man who just reminded all of us what this company is supposed to stand for. I heard the glass hit the floor before I turned around. Reed was standing about 15 feet away. The whiskey went straight down, not a slip, not a fumble, just dropped clean out of his hand. He stared at me. I looked back at him and gave him the same nod he had given me at the bar an hour earlier. The room stayed quiet for about 3 seconds. Then Owen started clapping and the rest of the room followed. The board meeting was Monday morning at 8 a.m. I came in early, set up my laptop, and had coffee waiting on the table. One by one, the executives filed in. Miles arrived first, then two other board members, then Harlan Price, who sat at the far end and did not make eye contact with me. Owen took his seat at the head of the table. Reid came in last 3 minutes before the hour and sat in the only open chair, which happened to be directly across from me. He looked like he had not slept. Owen opened the meeting. Wade has something to present. Everyone give him your full attention. I kept it straightforward. 34 slides, no theatrics. The supply chain optimization system I had been building for 8 months was not company property. The core architecture was developed on my own time, on my own equipment, documented from day one. I had the records. My attorney had reviewed everything the previous week and confirmed it was clean. Conservative projections showed the system saving Dune Systems $14 million per year. Delivery error rates down 18%. Operational redundancies cut by nearly a third. I walked through the numbers slowly because I wanted everyone in the room to understand exactly what they were looking at. Miles looked up from his notes after slide 11 and said, "Name your price." I told him my terms were not financial. The room shifted a little when I said that. People sat up straighter. I had 3 conditions. First, an age diversity committee with binding authority over hiring and promotion decisions. Not advisory, binding. Any termination of an employee over 45 required committee review before it could be processed. Second, reinstatement offers to the 4 people wrongfully pushed out with full back pay calculated from their last day, and Reid would make every call personally, not HR. Not an email from a coordinator. Reid picks up the phone, dials each number himself, and asks them to come back. Third, Reid signs each reinstatement letter by hand. Not DocuSign, not an assistant printing and signing on his behalf. His handwriting, his pen, on each of the 4 letters. I watched Reid while I laid out the second and third conditions. His expression did not change much. He was holding a pen and he set it down on the table when I finished. Miles looked at Owen. Owen looked at me. We accept. All of it. Harlan Price started to say something about process concerns and Owen stopped him with 2 words. All of it. Price closed his folder and did not speak again. Reid had said nothing through the entire presentation. When Owen looked at him, he nodded once, slow, deliberate, like a man accepting something he had decided not to fight. I had expected that moment to feel better than it did. It felt mostly like relief, like setting down something heavy after carrying it for a long time. The committee was formalized that same week. 5 members, myself, Reid, Paige representing employees under 35, Owen for the board, and Faye from HR, who, to her credit, had flagged concerns about 2 of the terminations internally before any of this became public. Those flags had been overridden by Price. After the board meeting, Price quietly stepped down from the board within 30 days, citing personal commitments. Nobody pushed back on that decision very hard. Reid started making calls the following Tuesday. I know because Paige told me she had stayed late and heard him through the glass wall of the small conference room he had booked for the afternoon. 4 calls, one after another. She said he did not use a script. He just talked. She could not hear the words clearly, but she said his voice sounded different than it usually did. Quieter. All 4 people accepted reinstatement. One of them asked for a different role than the one she had before. We gave it to her. The signed letters went out by end of week. Reid's handwriting, 4 envelopes hand-addressed. About 2 weeks after the board meeting, the diversity committee held its first formal session. We reviewed every termination from the previous 5 months. We documented the pattern. We built a remediation framework that would govern how performance issues were handled going forward. It was not a fast process, and it was not always comfortable, but it was thorough. Reid showed up to every session prepared. He did not show up defensive, which was what I had expected. He showed up with research, age-diverse team performance data, retention studies, case examples from other companies that had gone through similar resets. He was not performing engagement, he had actually done the reading. About 3 weeks in, Paige came to my desk and mentioned she was struggling with a section of the optimization system that Reid had originally handed her. The architecture underneath it was not something she had seen before. She asked if I had time to walk through it with her. I told her to pull up a chair. We worked through it for 2 hours. I explained why I had built the structure the way I had, what problem I was solving at each layer, what would break if you tried to shortcut certain steps. She asked good questions, sharp ones. Toward the end of the session, she suggested a cleaner approach to one of the secondary modules that I had been stuck on for weeks. It was a better solution than what I had. I told her so. She laughed and said she could not have seen it without understanding the foundation first. After that, we started meeting 3 mornings a week. No agenda, just working through the system together. What we built over the next 2 months was better than what either of us had designed alone. Not by a small margin either. The efficiency gains came in at 29% above my original projections when we ran the first full test. Miles sent me a 1-line email when he saw the results. It said, "I owe you a steak dinner." Reed knocked on my office door on a Thursday afternoon about a month after the board meeting. He came in carrying a folder and sat down across from me without being asked. That was new. The old Reed did not sit down in other people's offices. He summoned people to his. He opened the folder and slid a document across the desk. It was a sustainability proposal, quarterly culture audits, succession planning frameworks requiring diverse candidate slates, compensation structures tied to inclusivity metrics, ongoing education requirements for anyone in a management role. I read through the first few pages without saying anything. "I want to present this to the board before the quarter closes," he said. "Cultural change does not hold without structural reinforcement. The research is pretty consistent on that. Organizations revert within 18 to 36 months if the systems are not built to sustain the shift." I looked up at him. "This is thorough. It needs to be," he said. I kept reading. The implementation timelines were realistic. The metrics were specific enough to be measurable. Someone had put real work into this. I set the document down. "You want a run point on this?" "Yes." I studied him for a moment. 6 months ago, this man had pointed at me in a room full of people and called me deadweight. Now he was sitting in my office asking me to back a proposal he had built on his own time. "There is something I want to ask you first," I said. He nodded. "The push to get rid of the older engineers. I understand the MBA logic. Move fast, cut what looks slow, show the board a clean break-even. But what was actually driving it for you?" He did not answer right away. He looked at the folder on my desk for a few seconds. "I was scared," he said. "Not of you specifically, of what you represented. Guys who had been inside these systems for 20 years who knew where everything was buried. I thought the ones who would adapt fastest to AI and automation were people like me. I thought if I did not move first, I would be the one getting pushed out eventually, so I pushed first. I let that sit for a second. So you fired the people who could have helped you survive what you were afraid of." He did not answer that. He did not need to. "You have my support on the proposal," I said. "Present it to Owen first, then the full board." He picked up the folder and stood. At the door, he stopped and turned back. "I was offered a position last week," he said. "Different company. Better title, more equity, significant raise." "Congratulations," I said. I turned it down. I waited. They wanted me for what they called my aggressive modernization approach. They specifically mentioned the workforce restructuring I had done here before the committee was formed. He paused. "That is not who I want to be going forward, and I have not finished what I owe the people I pushed out." He left. I sat at my desk for a while after that, not doing much of anything. 6 months after that Monday meeting, I stood in front of the full company at the quarterly all hands. The auditorium was full. I kept the presentation short because the numbers did not need a lot of decoration. Productivity up 29%, turnover down 35%, innovation metrics, new process improvements, patents filed, product upgrades up 44%, employee satisfaction scores up 31%. I said what I actually believed, which was this: these results did not come from picking one generation over another. They came from stopping that fight altogether and building something that used everyone's best work. Reed started the applause from the front row. Paige was sitting next to him. She had been promoted to team lead 5 weeks earlier. She caught my eye and gave me a small nod. I gave one back. After the all hands, Fletcher found me in the hallway. He had flown in from his place outside Austin for the occasion. He looked the same as he always did. A little grayer, still sharp. He shook my hand the way he had the first time, both hands firm. "I should have told people who you were a long time ago," he said. "You gave me 22% of the company and left me alone to build things." I said, "That was the right call." He laughed. "You always were the easiest partner I ever had." We stood there for a minute, not saying much else. There was not much else that needed saying. Ride's sustainability proposal passed the board unanimously 2 weeks later. He was appointed Chief People Officer and took on the culture and talent portfolio with a mandate to make the Diversity Committee a permanent governance structure. Last I checked, the 4 people who came back were all still here. One of them got promoted. The system Paige and I built is running across every operational division. I still drive the same truck, still eat lunch at my desk most days, still wear jeans on Fridays. Some things do not need to change. Here's what I will say to you directly, because you have stayed with me through all of it. If you are over 50 and someone at your job is counting you out, writing you off, moving your desk toward the supply closet, let them finish their sentence. Do not argue. Do not threaten. Go home, open a document, and start writing everything down. then build something they cannot take credit for. The best move I made was not the IP reveal or the legal letter or the dinner moment. It was 26 years of quiet work that nobody could dispute. Experience is not a liability. It is inventory. Most people just do not know how to read the balance sheet. If this story hit close to home, drop it in the comments. I read every one,